What if the people you lose never actually leave? Susanne Arens has lived through unimaginable loss, losing her father, her young daughter, and facing multiple battles with her own health. At one point, she hit rock bottom, not knowing how to keep going. But what happened next changed everything. Through vivid dreams, signs, and experiences she couldn't explain, Susanne began to believe she was receiving messages from loved ones who had passed. Today, she's an evidential psychic medium who claims to have captured proof of the spirit world. Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors, where we share real stories of people getting stuck up Shit Creek, the paddles they use to get out, and hope for anyone stuck up their own Shit Creek right now. Let's get into it. Susanne, thank you so much for being here. It is such an honor, a blessing, a privilege. If you would introduce yourself to us and let us know kind of what life was like before the creek.
Life was pretty simple for me before the creek. I grew up with a simple background. I'm a farm girl from Minnesota, so work hard, play even harder. So life was pretty blissful until things started going off the rails for me.
Yeah. What started happening?
The real first one, I guess, was I guess my father
Okay.
passing. He always wanted me to move back home. I lived in Colorado. I moved out there after college, and he always asked me to come back, and I didn't. And he ended up getting brain cancer.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
at age 53, he passed from brain cancer. And when you're in your 20s, you think 53, oh my gosh, he's already got one foot in the grave. But when I got to 53, I'm like, gee, Louise, I think I'm in my prime.
Right.
He was robbed.
Mhm.
And so my mother had called, after surgery, they couldn't do anything. They just kind of closed it back up and said, "Well, you have 6 to 9 months to live," and I don't even think we'd gotten to the 6-week mark, and my mother called and said, "Get home right away. He's not gonna make it. I'm telling you, don't listen to the doctors. Please get in your car and head now." So I told my employer where I was working at the time, I quit, and I 'cause I don't know when I'm coming back,
Right.
and I waited for my sister and her husband to get off work, and so we caravaned together cross country. It's 1,035 miles from my door to their door.
Okay.
And so nonstop, it's about 15 and a half hours, only stopping for gas. And so we were in Nebraska, middle of the night, and I got a knowing that he'd come to me. It's now called a shared death experience in SDE. It's a new coin phrase. Dr. Moody came up with it. NDE was his as well,
Right.
near death experience. Now it's SDE, shared death experience, where he was actually passing at that moment. And he had come
Wow.
to me and said, "I'm sorry, Susie, we're not going to be able to go fishing tomorrow." And I knew
Oh,
exactly what he meant, and I was just devastated, and I was flashing my headlights at my sister's and her husband's vehicle in front of me, and they pulled over and they're like, "What's the problem? What's going on?" And I did have one of those, phones built into the car. Uh,
mhm.
this was way, way back, right, 1990, and, um and so there was no reception in Nebraska. Those
Right.
cops, no reception. So I said, Dad just came to me. I told her the whole thing. And of course, she was very, very angry at me for saying something like that. But I just knew it. And this was way before I discovered I was an potential psychic medium. But I just
Wow.
knew it. And so by the time we pulled in the yard, I think it was between 2 and 3 a.m. And we had the lights in the yard that lit up the farmyard, and it was full of cars.
Yeah.
So I knew.
Yeah.
And I found it very difficult to get out of the car. So after all that, I'm back in Colorado and I'm having nightmares. The guilt, they
Mhm.
asked me for years to come back home and I didn't. And and when I did go see him during his brain surgery, I stayed with him on the farm for a couple of weeks. But sitting there with him on the couch, neither one of us was talking because I knew I had to leave to come back to Colorado. And I knew he didn't want me to go. And I
Yeah.
just had that sinking feeling that if I left now, this would be the last time I seen him alive. So the nightmare started
Yeah.
because of the guilt, you know. And anyways, he came to me in one of my dreams, and now I realize again it wasn't a dream. A dream for most of us, we remember it right when we wake up, but within 10 seconds to a minute, It's gone, right?
Yeah.
That's a dream. An experience you're having will last forever. And I can still remember all the details of this dream I had. And it was basically he had come to me and said it was okay, that he was doing all right, and other things. But it gave me such peace
Mhm.
that I immediately sat up in bed right after, right when he departed from my dream. And I had this overwhelming sense of a calmness over me. And I never had another nightmare.
Wow.
And so I think a lot of people might have something like that and they dismiss it. Don't dismiss it. Not if you can remember it an hour later, a day later, a week later, so on and so forth. It's probably something that really truly happened, and it happened on a soulful energy, spiritual level. Whether
Yeah.
you're religious or not, we are made of energy. Tesla proved that.
Yeah.
And energy's in the ground, in the atmosphere. They know we have 0 point energy now. We are all part of that energy. And as a psychic medium, that is what I'm tapping into when I
Okay.
give people readings and I work on people and work on cases and things like that. And so it's really a thing. So hopefully more and more people will find their spirituality, whether they want to belong to a church or not. But that's where you're really gonna get connected, and I think have a much deeper understanding.
Yeah.
The next big one that really was I was drowning in the creek, um, and I was okay with that. I became suicidal, when our daughter passed away. Our first
So
daughter
sorry.
had, passed away, and, I had been bedridden with her for 5 months, and I've been monitored by the hospitals, and the body, I just don't care pregnancies very well.
Mhm.
Anyways, long story short, I knew something was wrong. I had gone to my doctor. They said, "Oh, you're overreacting, you're first-time mother," and I said, "No," and I pleaded with them again, not knowing that I was an evidential psychic medium, not knowing that I know things to be true. Went home, got back in bed. It just got worse and worse. So I went to the hospital that afternoon. They again sent me home saying I was overreacting. Now it's nighttime and I'm in so much pain. In fact, I on the tombstone it would have said dialed in childbirth. Um, I called the hospital. It's now in the middle of a blizzard. And I called the hospital and I said, "We're coming. There's something really, really wrong." I couldn't even speak anymore. I mean, I couldn't even swear anymore. I was in so much pain. And so
Wow.
my husband got me in the car. We get to the hospital. There was no surgeon there to even do a C-section, nothing. And the nurse brought over the stethoscope to listen to the heartbeat. And she says to me, I quote, "I can't get a heartbeat. I think the baby's dead. Why did you wait so long to come in? I think it's too late." Now I'm hysterical. I went to my doctor. I was at the hospital. I warned him ahead of time I was coming, and now they're telling me it's all my fault. Well, she survived with the grace of God, and so did I. Now fast
Awesome.
forward 3.5 months, she wasn't breathing right. I knew she wasn't. I told my coworkers, "I have a really, really, really bad feeling. I think something horrible is gonna happen to her. If something does, I'm never gonna be able to forgive myself." So they said, "Well, you better take her to the doctor." So I took her to the head of pediatrics at Memorial Hospital, and everybody, all the nurses, they're like, "We've been watching you in the lobby. You and your daughter have this amazing bond." But we don't really ever see anybody bond with their child like you have. This is just beautiful to watch. So we get in the back and he says, "Why are you here?" And I said, "She's not breathing right." "Oh, let me listen." "No, she's just fine. You're just overreacting being a first time mother." I said, "No, no, please, please listen to me. I'm telling you, I have a really bad feeling something's not right. It's just fine." He didn't x-ray her or anything, x-ray her lungs. The very next morning, she died in the daycare, and the autopsy proved she had pneumonia.
I'm so sorry.
So now I'm in a very dark place.
Yeah.
And so somebody recommended we go to a counselor, and so I did. My husband and I went and found a counselor. In fact, his child, of all people, was driven over by a beer truck as the kid was crossing the crosswalk going to school. So you would think if anybody would identify with what we were going through, it would be him. Well, the second session we had with him, he literally said these exact words: "Maybe you weren't meant to be a mother." And
Wow.
up until that point, I wasn't suicidal, just utterly gutted. all I wanted to be now was a mother. I
Mhm.
loved her more than life itself. So to have someone say to you, maybe she was taken from you because you weren't meant to be a mother, kind of thing. That's when I started driving up and down the mountain pass in my little black car as fast as I could without my seatbelt on, hoping to go over the cliff. Being
Mhm.
Catholic, we were taught that if you commit suicide, you don't go to heaven, you go to purgatory. And then I wouldn't get to see her, but I figured I could outsmart God. See, if I just drove off the cliff, if the car lost control and drove off the cliff, that'd be okay.
That's so funny you say that. I actually was doing things like that. I was too scared to actually take my life because I wasn't sure what that would mean. And I was at a state park one time on a cliff, and I decided it was a good idea to hang from a tree on that cliff. And I know in that moment I was suicidal, and I was actually like kind of hoping that it would happen.
Yeah.
That's so, wow. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh,
interrupt you.
no,
It's
not at
just,
all. No, and so my mother, God bless her, she took the whole family on a cruise thinking it would cheer everybody up. Well, my sister decided to share that she was now pregnant again before we even got on the cruise ship. So not only did I lose my child, but now she's going to have another child.
mhm,
So every night I went up on deck and stood on the railing to jump.
wow.
Still don't know why I didn't.
Mhm,
It was just too much to bear until a total stranger came up to me and said, "You know, God knows what you're doing." What? And they walked off. And I just went, "What?"
yeah.
Meaning he knows what you're trying to do. And at that
Mm,
point, I stopped going to church. In fact, I made a point of swearing at God every day, all day long. How
mhm,
dare you take my child when there's
yeah,
children being starved and tortured in this world? You know what I mean? How could you do that? And
yeah.
then my husband at the time, or boyfriend at the time, and fiance at the time, we were planning to get married. The day of our daughter's funeral, the diocese calls us to tell us that they're not going to approve our marriage.
Why?
I think that because I hadn't gotten in the eyes of the church, a proper annulment from my first husband, who had died drinking and driving after we had divorced. But that's a whole nother story. But anyways,
And they knew what you had been going through.
the church did not. No, no, I don't think
No.
so. We did have the funeral at the church and everything, but this was the diocese calling. I don't remember. I don't think it was a bishop. It could have been, or a priest from the diocese. But anyways, boy, did he get an earful.
Yeah, I
Of
bet.
all the days to call me,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
call me right after I get home from the
Mhm.
funeral of my daughter. Next thing I know, I get a letter in the mail that we've been approved to get married at the church.
Really?
And I'm thinking, I'm like, yeah, no, you've literally picked the wrong person on the wrong day.
Yeah,
If you think I give a royal's butt about ever getting married in a church ever again, you are sadly, I mean, because I was so angry. You
yeah.
know, all those stages you go through of the grief and the denial and then the
Mhm.
guilt. You know, I mean, I could have done more, should have done more. And I think of all the people I give readings to where I bring in their child that's passed away either at their own hands or the hands of somebody else or just by natural causes, we all, as parents, we all have this ridiculous guilt that we should have been able to protect them. We should have been able to do more. And I had that. In fact, I found out I was pregnant with Morgan the day I was supposed to have my hysterectomy. So God was obviously going, wait, 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 time out. No, no, no,
Wo
you're meant to have kids. And to
Wow.
take that child from me, I'm thinking, what kind of sick joke is this? So now move along. I had some other internal things. So now the surgery was back on again, and they were literally going to take everything. Again, I get a phone call from the blood work that morning saying, well, you're not going to believe this one. Uh, you're pregnant again. And now I'm hysterical with joy. Like I got the phone call, I ran out of my house and I was screaming in the streets because I just couldn't believe that I could have a child again. But then quickly thereafter, the joy came the depression because, well, I'll never be able to love this child as much as I love Morgan. I mean, I loved her so much. Those wheeling and dealing, let me die, just let her live. Take everything I have, take my life, just let her live. Those moments of wheeling and dealing because you're just at the bottom, right? You just
Yeah.
don't care. You can't go on anymore. You're mentally and physically in so much pain. You
Yeah, you're
just
done.
you
You're
just don't
done.
give a rat's foot anymore about anything, right?
Yeah.
But now I've been gifted with this child again. But how could I possibly love her as much as I love Morgan? So she came to me in a vision, and I seen her laying in her white satin coffin, and she sat up and looked at me and didn't say anything. She just smiled at me and gave me the knowing that it's going to be okay, Mom. Really, Mommy, you're going to love her just as much as you love me.
Man.
And it was everything. Everything changed at that moment. In fact, that daughter I was pregnant with at the time, her name is Olivia Miyagi Arens. And
Mhm.
Miyagi, because my husband's half Japanese, Miyagi means gift in Japanese.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And now fast forward, she was born and she's only a few months old. And we're driving down the road. And this is when car seats were allowed to be in the back seat facing forward.
Mhm.
Between the two front seats, she was busy talking back there. And I looked back at her and I about because it was Morgan looking at me. She was about 3 months old, about the same age Morgan was, and my kids all look drastically different, but that was Morgan looking at me, and I can tell you exactly where I was on the road the moment that happened. So,
What a gift.
what a gift, right? So, I was listening to a local radio station, and, this guy had on this husband and wife couple, uh, Native American and they lived in Hawaii, but they were psychic mediums, right? So they were telling this radio personality all sorts of things about himself, which was freaking him out. Like, I
Mhm.
don't think he actually believed in it because now he's getting like really upset, right? Wasn't swearing, but he was pretty close to it. Sorry. Get a little emotional when I talk about my daughter, even all these years later.
Got me
But
emotional. I mean, my goodness.
But anyways, I decided I would call them and book a reading with them. And, um, and as soon as I got on the phone with them, um, she said, "What would you like to talk about?" And then the wife says, "Oh, you've lost a child." I said, "Yes, I have." And of course, now I'm coming unhinged. And she goes, "Oh, honey, it's okay. Don't cry. She told God she needed to come back to you. You weren't going to make it without her. That you have a child now, right? A girl." I said, I do have a little girl." She goes, "Yeah, that's the soul of your first daughter. She came back to you."
Wow.
She goes, "You know that. She showed herself to you."
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
Crazy and so beautiful.
Yeah. So it's just we all go through it such sometimes really horrific things. And at the time, we don't really understand why.
Mhm.
At the time, if someone would have said to me, "Well, you asked for that experience," I'm pretty sure I would have gone for their jugular.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
But looking back on it now, I couldn't do what I do for people, which is very, very healing, had I not gone through it. It's kind of like when you're in AA. You can't be an AA sponsor. You can't talk the talk if you didn't walk the walk,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You could have lost a nephew, you could lost a neighbor kid, or whatever. But going through everything I went through, it really gives you a really crazy perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I value life in general immensely, but what was the pivot point was after I'd lost her, I demanded answers. Like I said,
Mhm.
I was so mad. I stopped going to church and swore God every day.
Yeah.
And so I started reading books and watching shows. I found Closer to the Light by Melvin Morose, which was a crazy, I read the whole thing front to back. It's a little paperback, just bawled all the way through it. But it gave me so much hope because, you know, be Catholic, I knew heaven existed, but was my dad there to greet her? Was she scared? Was she I mean, you have questions.
Right.
I demanded those answers. And so reading all these books and watching these shows, I started to realize, well, wait a minute. This stuff happens to me because there was always a spiritual component to it. And then somehow you would hear about some kind of a psychic and or medium. Of course, mediums weren't really a thing back in the 90s, but in early 2000s, it wasn't as known as it is today. But it was just very interesting because I started thinking, well, wait a minute. But I still didn't give it a whole lot of thought. But then I would have visions, right? And growing up, I had a few of those that I can recall. But back where I come from, I always tell people we had 3 channels on UHF and VHF, and 2 of them were snowy, and 1 came in halfway decent, and it's because of all the tinfoil on it.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of options, right? So this kind of spirituality and things, paranormal stuff, that wasn't anything talked about. I would always just say, "Wow, I had another deja vu moment," and I just found I said that a lot. But as
Yeah.
I got older and into my 20s, it was happening a lot,
Oh,
and
okay.
people would go, how did you know that? Like, I would be sitting there on the couch talking to a friend of mine. I said, "Oh, the phone's gonna ring. It's gonna be Arthur, and he's gonna say this." And Bonnie goes, "What?" Just saying, "Bling," the phone rings. Says, "Oh, just a minute." Picked up the phone. I said, "Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. She goes, "Don't tell me." I said, "Yep, that was Arthur, and he said blah, blah, blah." She goes, "How'd you do that?" I said, "I don't know,
I don't
but I
know.
know I can do that."
Yeah.
Like, I knew what the sex of all my children were before the doctor ever said it. The moment I got pregnant, I knew what I was having. I'd go
Wow.
shopping, and Arthur would go my husband would go, "Why are you spending all this money? You have no idea." I'm like, "Oh, it's that girl." Like, "You don't know that." I'm like, "Yeah, I do." I mean, just so that's when
Right.
I really, about, what, 8 or so years ago, I really started to take some classes and really kinda go down
I
that
w
deep.
I was gonna ask how you started to kind of not I don't know if the right word is tune that skill or something like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
but
No, that's a good word to describe it.
so you said you actually were able to find some classes that were helpful in that. I That's interesting. How did that work?
Well, when I finally realized what I was very alone again. I don't know
Mm,
anybody else like me. I don't know where to go. I don't know what. So I started doing some research online and finding blogs and videos and reading a ton of books and listening to a lot of audiobooks. And so over a period of 4 or 5 years, I probably spent over $25,000 on training and education from instructors in the States as well as overseas in the UK. I
wow.
sometimes would even travel there to go to all-week workshops or weekend workshops. A lot of it was done by Zoom, so I really kind of jumped in with both feet and drank through the garden hose, or I should say the fire hose, really,
Yeah.
because I was just madly wanting to know more and understand more.
Yeah.
And then I practiced. I probably gave between 5 and 600 readings for free for people all over the world by Zoom just to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice before I decided I would go pro. In fact, I don't know if you know who James Van Praagh is. He's an older guy, and he was one of my instructors, and I was out in, I went to training with him in California as well, but then during COVID, we did this Zoom event. And so there's all these people on, pages of people. And I was one of the people that would give a reading if I happened to get somebody, and long story short, I, had this young 16-year-old girl that came forward, and I just said, "Well, I have somebody for the audience." I said, "I don't know how deep these pages go, but if this resonates with you, please put your hand up." And, anyways, after the reading was over, James Van Praagh was pretty excited, and, he said some very, very nice things, and when the whole event ended, he goes, "What are you waiting?"
Yeah.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Honey, I just don't ever see anybody doing what you just did." He goes, "Time to go pro." So that's where I decided I would take the training wheels off and give it a go.
Isn't it funny how the universe or God works like that? You get exactly what you need at the exact moment you need it instead of and you don't know what's coming. You know what I mean? So you're worried the whole time. You're worried, and it's always just on time, right on time, exactly when it's supposed to be. And you're like,
I
why couldn't
guess
you just?
so. Yeah, you're right. I guess so. I didn't really think about it quite that way, but yeah, I guess so. Everybody kept telling me, I would sign up for these classes. because I just want to practice, practice, practice. And this one gal, I had sat in her class for mediumship, and I was sitting there for weeks. And we were meeting like 3 times a week, and and the class was like an hour long, and I wouldn't say anything. I was just listening, just in
Yeah.
awe of, other people and what they would every once in a while get something right. And I'm like, oh gosh, that's so amazing. And then every class, she would start out by, let's go into a 10-minute meditation. When we come out, put your little hand up because it was by Zoom and let me know if you think you got somebody. So we did that, and I put my little hand up, and she goes, "Yes, Suzanne, do you have a question?" And then she goes, "Oh my gosh, you have somebody." And I said, "Well, yeah, I think I do." And she goes, "Well, what did you get?" I said, "Well, his name is Larry, and he lived on a farm, and he had horses, not cows, because the manure smelled like horses, not cows. And he had this trough up front, but they used a metal bucket with this." And I was going on and on. She goes, "Poor crap, okay." And she goes, "Stop, stop. Can anybody take anything?" She just said. And this gal held up her hand, little voice thing. She goes, "Yeah, that is my grandfather. His name was Larry." She goes, "Well, is there anything she said that was right?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, pretty much all of that." And she goes, "Well, keep going." And I'm like, "Okay, well," he shows me inside his house and blah, blah, because I see, hear, smell, taste. I have like all the clairs. So it went on and on and on. Finally, she goes, "Okay, I got to stop you because this is an hour long. I've got other people, but that's great." So now the next class starts, 2 days later, whatever. And I come on and she messages me privately. She goes, "Well, this class is for beginners." And I'm like, "I know, I'm so excited." So I stayed there the whole time. And of course, the whole thing happened again then. And then the next class, finally, she calls me. She goes, "Hi, yeah, this is instructor so and so. And I wanted to talk to you for just a minute." And I said, "Yes." I says, "I love your class. This is amazing." She goes, "Yeah, so, yeah, but here's the thing. I'm going to very nicely ask you to please stop coming."
You belong in a more experienced one.
And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, I was devastated. I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "Honey, this is for beginners." I'm like, "Yeah." This was like the very first time I ever opened my mouth
Right.
and said what I got, because I was expecting something different. You watch the
Mhm.
TV and the movies, right?
Yeah.
And things are supposed to unfold a certain way. So that's
Yeah.
what my expectation was. It wasn't until I finally just let go and let Larry walk in that I realized, for me, it works differently. She goes, "Yeah, no one's going to come back to class if you're there, Suzanne. No one will talk. You really just please." And I'm like,
That's
I was
that
devastated, but yet
it's also a compliment,
it was a compliment. But I'm like, "Now where do I go?" He just
Yeah.
kicked me out, and I finally got a hold of this thing. So, anyways, but I would like to tell something to your audience, because this really shocked me. I was saying I was doing this event, and this 16-year-old girl came in that had committed suicide. Well, the reading was amazing, and the young gal gave a ton of information. It was very, very healing. I don't think there was a dry eye on any of the little icons on any of the pages. It was really, really beautiful for the mom and everyone. Now, fast forward a year, the mom calls me and she says, "It took me this long to find you and find your number," because again, I wasn't pro. I was still like practicing, right? I
Right.
didn't have anything published, anything out there. And she goes, "Here's the kicker." She goes, "I live an hour from you in Denver." She goes, "Can I come for another reading?" And by then now I'm I charge for readings. I can,
Yeah.
right. So I said, "Sure." Well, she came for a reading, and it was a beautiful reading, again with her daughter. Okay. Now about 2 months passed, she wanted another reading. I said, "Okay." So she came for another reading, but this time the daughter put her foot down, and she said something that I didn't know how to process it, because I have been trained, do no harm. Never
Mhm.
tell anybody anything that could be misconstrued or be harmful to them,
Right.
right? And even the most innocent thing that you might say could be misconstrued. Like, what if the loved one in spirit says, "Oh, I can't wait to see them on Tuesday"?
Mhm.
Would you tell the client that you're giving a reading to? Well, no, because that means they're going to die on Tuesday, right? And I'm
Right.
like, never thought about that.
Right.
Here's what the daughter said to me. She goes, "Tell my mom I'm gonna pull back now." "No, what do you mean you're gonna pull back now?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm the reason that she's in the state. It's been 7 years. She refuses to get on with her life. I'm done. This is it." And I'm like, "No."
It's like, how do I tell your
I'm like,
mom that?
"You're not saying that." I mean, talk about do no harm,
Right. Yeah.
and I'm gonna stab her in the heart? I'm like, "Oh." She goes, "You have to." You have to tell her this. We're also trained, it's not our job to decipher what spirit wants to get across. Sometimes they might say something kind of almost in a, curse word, flippant way. And you're like, oh, just say it to them that way. You have to. And then you say it to them, they're like, oh my gosh, they said that exact thing all the time. So it
Right.
means something. Well, here's this daughter going, you have to say this to her. And I went, okay. So I looked at my client. I said, I just got to tell you, it's been 7 years. You refuse to get out of the morning state. You refuse to get on with your life. You refuse to find joy anymore. When you hurt like this, you're hurting her because she's caused you to be in this state of grief. You
Mm,
didn't shoot her or stab her or personally kill her, but because you have such pain that you're hanging on to, she feels your pain and she can't deal with it anymore. She just can't anymore. She's going to pull back now. And she goes, what? I said, you got to get on with your life. You got to find joy again. You got to find purpose. She wants to enjoy your life with you. She's still
mm,
very much around. She wants to have new memories, make new memories with you so that when you get there one day, you could talk about that cruise you went on or how you rode a bike for 10 miles and went blah, blah, blah. She'll be there with you. She wants to do this stuff with you. So she left, kind of heartbroken and left. Well, I don't know how many months went by, 5, 6 months went by. She called me for another reading. I'm like, oh, nope, 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 we're done. Nope, nope. Your daughter made it crystal clear. We're done. She goes, no, 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 please, please, just one more, please. And the minute she got to my office and I opened up the door, she was just a burst of beautiful energy. I went, oh, come on in. We have much to talk about. And she sat down and started telling me how she's gone back to work and she's joined these groups and she's all that, just bubbling with laughter and joy and love. And then she says to me, do you think my daughter will come back to me now? And the whole time she was talking to her daughter was standing right next to her. And I said,
awesome.
oh, honey, she came back to you a long time ago. So your
Man.
loved ones want you to still go on with your life, even if you can't necessarily see them. And one of the things that I discovered was I wasn't grieving for Morgan, my daughter who passed. I was grieving for myself.
Mm,
If people can understand that I know that she was with my grandparents and my father in heaven and that she's with the angels. I know that, but I wasn't going to get to see her go on her
mm,
first date. I wasn't going to get to see her graduate from high school. I wasn't going to see her get married. I wasn't going to see her how much me. I internalized it and made it all about my loss. And then I made the suffering for me, right? And if people can understand, that's why I tell everybody, please find spirituality, whether you want to go to church or not. Heaven is real. God is real. Whether you want to call him God or the creator or the divine source, find your terminology, but it's real. And there's so much evidence around. I gave a gal a reading and her husband came in and a fairly young couple. And he was telling me about the bucket list. And I said, oh, he's telling me about your bucket list. She goes, what? I said, yeah, you guys had a bucket. Oh, he said, you could go on a cruise. It's on your bucket list. She goes, yeah, well, we were going to, definitely, I'm not going to do that now. I said, he says, yes, he wants you to go on the cruise. And she goes, no, no, no. I said, he's saying, yeah, you are. And to bring, I don't remember the girlfriend's name, if it's Rachel or whatever. I said, and to bring Rachel with. She goes, what? I said, he's going to be there with you on the cruise. And then you're going to still go to all those places you had lined up, all the shore excursions. And one day when you get in heaven, for him, it'll be like tomorrow because there's no time in heaven. But one day when you get there, you can talk about this adventure you had. She's
wow.
like, holy crap. And so I had a gal given a reading too, and I could tell she was struggling. I could feel the depression. And then I could see her because I can remote view and stuff. And so I said, oh, I said, please excuse me. I said, but um, would you understand why I feel like you're struggling with depression? She goes, yeah. And I said, well, I see that you sit by yourself on a couch and like across the way is like a brick fireplace and then the TV's over here. And then over there is a bank of windows and a floor lamp. And she goes, what the flip? Like my living room. What? I said, just a second. I said, what you need to understand is you're never alone. You're never alone. I said, you have 4 or 5 people always standing in front of you, trying to cheer you on, trying to give you that energy, that hope, that strength to get off the couch. You can do this. And she goes, really? How would I know that? And then her friend in spirit says, showing me that she would be flickering the lamplight. And I said, well, your friend's been trying to get your attention with the lamp. Apparently she's been flickering the lamplight. That's when she goes, her whole attitude changed. And she goes, wait, what? You're
Whoa.
what? She goes, I changed the light bulb in that lamp no less than 3 times. I'm about this close to throwing the damn thing out. I said, no, that's your friend. She's been trying to communicate with you through the lamp. And she goes, and then that's when her friend goes, yeah, I would have done it in flashlight and Morse code if I would have thought she could have figured it out. And when I told her that, she about fell out of her chair laughing so hard. She goes, oh my God, that's exactly what she would have said to me. So then she realized, I said, don't throw the lamp out. Instead, start asking it yes or no questions. Flash twice for a yes, once for a no. If you're around, blah, 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 blah. And that's what I want your audience to understand is we think we're alone. We are not alone. We are really never truly alone. Now, are they watching in the shower? No, of course not. Little intimate moments, of course not. But when you're thinking of them and we're at our saddest moments, even our happiest moments, they're with us, right? Take pictures, start running video. I talk about it in my book, step by step on how to actually capture the evidence yourself. But you also have to learn how to debunk it. Not everything you're capturing is going to be spiritual or interdimensional. And
Right.
so take those pictures at the birthday parties and the Christmas parties and run video and then look back on it and see if you see any light anomaly or anything moving through the room.
I'm going
Most
to
people
do
don't.
that. That is so interesting. Oh my gosh.
And it's just where I just don't want people to think that they're all alone and that nobody gets them and that,
Yeah.
there's no place for them to go. The power of prayer is honestly really powerful. And if you're not part of an association like an AA group or a church group, find somebody. There's a whole lot of support groups out there for just about everything.
Hmm.
Find somebody, and not everyone's going to resonate with you, right? Based on your own unique experience, but keep looking. They exist. They really do. There's a whole lot of people out there going through a whole lot of really honestly helpful shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A creek, right? Can
Mhm.
I share one story with your audience? One more story.
Absolutely. Please.
So this long story short, this single mom lost her only child. The child was in high school. And this child was murdered, brutally murdered. And I had done some things for the memorial service for her and whatnot through a friend. It's a long story. But anyways, I reached out to her and I just said, this is who I am. This is what I do. Come to find out she literally lives in my neighborhood. And I said, I'll give you a reading if you'd like when you're ready, but we need to wait 6 months. You need to really get to a point where you can hear what I have to say or what she wants to communicate with you.
Right.
Well, as I'm powering up for the reading, um, she came in as I'm powering up her daughter. And I've only had this happen twice, and she was the very first one. She came in and I could see her silhouette. She looked like a bright LED light bulb, but in the shape of a human being. And I'm just going to call her Sarah because I don't want to give her name away.
Okay.
Anyways, I'm going to back up so I can show you my arms. I can't see me, so I can only assume that this will work.
You're
But
perfect.
okay.
Perfect.
So I said, Sarah, is that you? And she went, "Fum, fum," with these huge, massive white wings. And I went,
Whoa.
I, you're an angel. You're an angel. And it's not that angels fly around with wings. Being Catholic, that was symbolism for me to know that she had earned her angel wings, that she was a very, very old soul. So now the mom's here for the reading. She comes in. I just say, this is going to be an amazing reading. Your daughter has already shown up for it. And meanwhile, before I let her in to where I was giving her the reading, I'm on my phone going, help me find a picture of you. Help me find a picture of you. I was going through all the Google images, trying to find a picture of like this angelic being that she looked like. And I found like 3, if you could kind of visualize them together, is kind of what she looked like in heaven. So I
Right.
said, and so I'm showing her going, this is your daughter. This is what she looks like now. And I told her what happened. And as the reading went on, I said to her, she was a very old soul, all these kind of things. And the mom confirmed every single thing the daughter had shared with me. Then the daughter says to me, tell my mom I want the Christmas tree up with the lights on. And I'm like, well, that was a weird way to say it, but okay. So I told her that, and she goes, oh, yeah, no, I'm not going to I'll probably never put that tree up. And I said, your daughter's standing right here, and she's telling me to tell you she wants that Christmas tree up and make
Mhm.
sure the lights are on. And that's when the mom says, well, that's the thing. It's one of those Christmas trees where the lights are built into the branches and it stopped working. And I said, we'll get a strand of lights then and string it on the tree. But she wants the tree up with the lights on. And then the daughter showed me, she went like this and showed me two small little Christmas ornaments. And she goes, and she wants those two special little Christmas ornaments put on the tree. Do you know the one she's talking about? She goes, yeah, my daughter loved all things mushrooms. And we were given two Christmas ornaments in the shape of hand blown mushrooms, glass mushrooms, two of them. I said, she wants them on the tree. Then she let me know, tell my mom I have a special gift for her on Christmas morning. And I knew exactly what she meant. I said, yes. And on Christmas morning, when you get up, I want you to take a picture of your Christmas tree. Your daughter's going to give you a special gift on Christmas morning. Bing! My phone goes off Christmas morning with the picture.
Real wow.
There was the face of her daughter and the lights in the Christmas tree. Swear to God. Swear to God, I
Blowing.
would never lie. Swear to God.
Wow.
I have the picture to prove it, the text messages to prove it. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
It's so beautiful.
So that's where people, if you are listening to this podcast, please know you're not alone. Your loved ones are always trying to get your attention, whether it be you're walking downtown and you get the smell of your Swisher Sweet cigars that your dad always smoked, or you're in the car and your deceased husband, all of a sudden the song that you always had, that you heard together, just comes on the radio. These aren't coincidences. In fact, a guy that I did a podcast for not very long ago, he says, yeah, so I tested this. I heard somebody tell me that before. So I said, Dad, if you're around, give me a sign. I know you love peaches, so do something with peaches. Give me a sign. And I think he said it was the very next day he was driving through town, and right in front of him, a truck with a big billboard of peaches on it cut him off on the street. Right in front of him. He goes, and it was like in the middle of the winter. So he's like, it's not like peaches were being delivered. He goes, and here comes this truck right in front of me. Peaches. He goes,
Wow.
I knew right away that was a sign from my dad. Isn't
Wow.
that something?
That is so amazing. I I had a so moments before I got shot, I was looking across the street. I could see the street that was moving up and away from us, and then it was the street in front of us. And I looked to my left, and there's a CNN crew right there. And as I looked over there, I heard in my head, Grandma would want you to look at that red car. And as I turned, that's the car that the guy shot me from. And had I not turned, it because I actually was turning and it hit me and it spun me instead of blowing out the back of my head.
Yeah. Grandma
I
saved you.
also asked the question, is heaven for real? And I bought the book because I was having a tough time during this whole everyone hated police. I
Yeah.
put it in my bag the night I got shot. I didn't even read it. I just put it in my bag preparing to read it. There's a lot going on.
There's
And
a
it
lot.
sounds so funny when these people come to you and they're like, yeah, well, prove it to me. And they come from this like cocky position of like, I've looked at every angle, you're dumb, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then you give them this nugget and all of a sudden this wave of, I don't know, humility and like shock and awe and joy and belief and things that you can't see. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, and for some
Wow.
people, I had this guy that was an atheist. He was dragged to the reading with his family because the son had committed suicide. And so the family dragged him with. And so as he's walking past me to come and sit down, he's like glaring at me because, you're full of crap and you're taking my family's money, all this kind of stuff. Well, the son came in and started sharing all this stuff. And now the dad's getting mad. Who told her that? Who told her that? How would you know? And it was just, and so he was now slowly coming unhinged
Mhm.
because now he's in his 40s, 50s, and he knows what he knows. And he, unfortunately, it's incorrect. He's an atheist. So, anyways, So his son was saying all these amazing things. And then his son says to me, he started laughing, and his son is spirit and says, yeah, tell him I'm haunting them. And I'm like, what? And he means in a funny way. And he goes, yeah, he threw like something like a hubcap. And it rattled in the garage and it startled the dad and whatnot. And so I told him that. And the dad's like, I could tell he didn't answer me, but I could tell that, yeah, that had happened just by the expression on his face. And then the son says, yeah, my dad has a picture of me on his phone. And so I told him that, and he goes, no, I don't. And the daughter goes, the sister of the deceased said, yes, you do. Dad, I told you that was him. I told you that was him. And he goes, no, no, it's not. I said, just a minute. I said, honey, will you go by your dad right now? Just a second. And I grabbed my phone. I stood back in the room and I said, will you go right by your dad right now? I ran video. And you could see an orb go right past his dad. And I showed it to him. I said, there's your son. And he just lost it. So now the reading's over. I mean, there was a little bit more to it than that, but then the reading's over and he's walking past me. And I try to give everybody a hug goodbye if they wanted. And I said, would you like a hug goodbye? And he's like, I mean, he was just shattered. He's like, I mean,
Yeah.
everything that he believed wouldn't just got blown out the window.
Yeah.
Right. Now he's going to have to come to reality of the spirit world is real. Your loved
Yeah.
ones are there.
Yeah.
You know,
And you're guiding them to a shift that is not a small shift.
not for
You-
some of them.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is like a door that opens and shows a universe behind it. This isn't like a small, like, blip. This is like, not only is this happening, but it's happening for you. This is happening. This is your son, and your son's out there with all these other, you know what I mean? Like, it opens a door to the unknown, and that can be scary. That can be
Oh my
scary,
gosh.
and it can take a minute, I bet, for a lot of people to process it.
Especially if you're in your 40s and 50s, you're halfway through life, and you
Yeah.
know for a fact that God doesn't exist because these horrible things have happened to you. And if God exists, these things would have happened. And I'd like to just remind people, I love Morgan Freeman, and he was in a movie, I think it's Evan Almighty. Do you remember
I
that one where he's filled in the gaps?
love that movie
Was that
for
not hilarious?
that scene.
So the wife is in a restaurant and
That's
Morgan Freeman is acting like the waiter or whatever. And he sees the wife and she's obviously bothered by something. And he says, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm
and
fine.
she's just left her husband with the kids.
Yeah,
She's actually said, I can't be here while this happens. This is too crazy. I'm
exactly.
out. And now they're at a
Exactly.
restaurant, and then Morgan Freeman sees her. Go ahead. Go
God,
ahead. Yeah.
God shows up, right?
Yeah.
And so he says, he just said something, I'm paraphrasing, but basically something to the effect that, if you ask God for opportunities to be courageous and to be patient and loving, does he just give you that ability? Or does he give you the opportunity to be patient? Does he give you the opportunity to have courage? Does he give you the opportunity to love, right? So
Yeah.
this is where, remember back early on when I was talking about Morgan and losing her. And apparently I'd signed up for that lesson, again, at the time, there's no flipping way I would have agreed to that.
Right.
Or could even see it from that lens, right?
Mhm.
That perspective. But when you hear Morgan Freeman, I just love the way he talks too. He's just honestly divine. But
Mhm.
it was so wise because, yes, God gives you these lessons. I tell people, if you you can look at your siblings, your neighbor, whatever, and your life's just been through the meat grinder and they're just skating through life. Well, they might be your sister, they might even be your spouse or whatever. But here's the deal. What I have learned are every soul is on its own journey, right?
Mm.
And we have lots of lifetimes, and every lifetime is kind of like signing up for a college course. Some souls are still in elementary school, so they couldn't possibly make it through what you just went through, Cameron. They just couldn't do it. They commit suicide and tap out. They're like, can't do it, just can't do it. I signed up, or too heavy of a course load. I can't do it. Right? Same thing. Some might graduate from high school and go, I'm done. I don't need to reincarnate anymore. I don't need any more soul growth. I know what I'm going to do when I get in heaven because, believe it or not, people have jobs, responsibilities, things they aspire to do in the afterlife. So they might just want to stop. Others might go, I'm going to go for my associate degree. I'm going to go 2 more years. It's not going to be easy, but I can do this because I want to learn. I want to get to this level of achievement. I want to learn this skill set.
Right.
Others might go for their master's or bachelor's or PhD, right? Those are older souls, right? Where it's not going to be easy. Masters aren't easy. Bachelor's even harder. PhD, gosh, just shoot me because there's no way I can go PhD, right? But
Yeah.
some of us are at that PhD level. Some of you are at master level. Some of you are at high school level, right? So you cannot compare what you're going through with somebody else because
Right.
that's not their life lesson. That is not what they signed up for. And here's the deal.
Mm.
If you think you're going to commit suicide and tap out, you're going to reincarnate and come back down and do it all over again because you're not going to get out of calculus 1, let alone get into calculus 2 or calculus 3 if you didn't pass calculus 1. So
Good.
just hunker down and get through it and stop throwing yourself a pity party because everybody's going through something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just that when it's happening to us, we feel like nobody understands that it's so much worse for us. But honestly, when you find yourself in those moments, just look around you. You can easily find someone that's going through something even worse than you.
Yeah.
You really can, if you look, right? But we
Yeah.
love to throw ourselves a pity party. What I tell people, and I tell my college students as well, I'm a college instructor as well, and I just say, look, you can be a victim or you can be a survivor.
Hmm.
Crap's going to happen to you,
Yeah.
right? It's how you react to it, how you deal with it. You know, the first time I got diagnosed with cancer, it was like kaboom. I mean, it was just I'd had my 2 girls now, Olivia and Raquel, and 3 children total, including Morgan. Life was great. I loved being a mom. It was everything. And now he's going to kill me. Like now God's going to kill me. Like, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. I am not going without kicking and screaming all the way. And I immediately made plan A, plan B, and plan C. Like, not happening. I immediately that day made the decision after I cried myself silly, made the
Right.
decision that I don't want to have my children know. I don't want to scare them. I don't
Hmm.
want them to know uh, right away. And they were training for the Junior Olympics and they were both very, very talented. And so I didn't want to tell them to afterwards. But but I also didn't want them to be as scared as I was.
Hmm.
But I knew I was going to get through this. I just didn't know how ugly the journey was going to get. Right.
Right.
Um, but I've had cancer a few different times now, and it no longer even bothers me to hear the word, "Do you have cancer?" The first time, yeah, it's such a shock, but honestly, it's nothing compared to hearing that your daughter just passed or your child just passed. To me, cancer, take me, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now when I hear it, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. I Yep. All right. What are we doing about it? Well, you can think about it, and there's nothing to think about. Like, let's get this shit on the road. Like, let's make this thing happen. In fact, the one Hertha cell in my thyroid. Long story short, the one doctor again didn't believe me. We're going to send you for physical therapy. I'm like, oh no, no, we're not. No, no. So I drove myself to Denver to Kaiser, and immediately they took me from this room to this test to this test to this test, and then I get a phone call. We're scheduling surgery immediately. And then I get the phone call after surgery from the biopsy, and she leaves a message. Hey, this is so and so, your doctor. I need you to call me back right away. I was busy, at work or whatever. And next message, I really do need to have you call me back right away. I need to talk to you. It was and she's spelling it out the kind of cancer it was. And I'm like, so I call her back. She goes, how quickly can you get here? And I'm like, well, okay, hour and a half, I guess, traffic and everything. So I get there. Now she's drawing out on her board the cancer cell and explaining this whole thing to me. And but they had taken the thyroid out, right? And I said on the one side where that one was. And she goes, and so she's explained to me how serious this is. And by the time they find it, you really have 2 weeks to 2 months to live. And I said, oh my God, this is great news. And she goes, uh, do you understand what I'm explaining to you? And I said, yeah, but you took it out, right? So now I don't have that in me anymore, right? So now I'm cancer free. I dodged another bullet. And she goes, oh my God. She goes, if everybody could look at news like this, like you do, boy, my job would be so much easier.
Yeah. I
And so
bet.
I immediately leave the hospital. I call my mother and I said, great news, Mom. And she goes, oh, thank God it wasn't more cancer. I said, oh, no, it was. And, by the time they catch it, it's always stage 4 and you're always dead within 2 weeks to 2 months. And she goes, I said, but wait, it's out. So I dodged another bullet, not listening to the doctors, listening to myself, insisting that there was something seriously wrong, got it out. And she starts laughing. My mom starts laughing. And she goes, only you would look at it this way. and only you would be happy to the fact that you got that dang thing out and that it was this horrible kind of cancer again. I said, I got a life to live, not giving up. I can now wade my way through that shit creek, Cameron.
I love it. I
No matter
love
how
that.
high that water gets in shit creek, I'm going through it.
And you're able to protect your personal peace along the way. Now, obviously, that isn't always perfect and everything like that, but there's something so powerful that being like, no matter what, I'm not going to quit.
No
I
matter
could
what.
die, but I'm not going to quit. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that's the way it's going to be. Like when I think about saying sober, I'm like, if I would rather die any other death than alcohol. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'll jump off a cliff before I drink kind of deal. You know what I mean? It's like you that's amazing that you're able to walk through things and just be like, you know what, I got this. I've been through some stuff. I don't know everything. I don't know all the answers, but I do know that if I put my head down and I have faith, I'm going to get through this.
Well, I'm not
Even if that means passing away, even if that means the next step is getting to heaven, even you know what I mean? Like just
I'm big on
I'm
adventure. I'm a scuba diver and mountain biker and hiker and ATV and UTV and I'm a zip liner. I mean, I'm going to die having an adventure. I'm
good.
not dying because of cancer. In
Right.
fact, the one kind of cancer I had, they found it running through another cancer. Anyways, so I don't actually even get to say I'm cancer free, but I don't think about it. I'm not going to die of cancer.
Right.
So it's just a bump in the road and it's your attitude, right? I was at the cancer I got in 2009. I went to one of those Susan Coleman luncheons, right, for cancer survivors and stuff. And there was what, 8, 10 of us sitting at a table, and there was a gal kitty corner from me, and she was going on and on. An older gal, she was in her 60s. Oh God, 80s, 80s. And she's going on and on about her cancer, and I had just gotten the tubes out of my chest and everything. I mean, I am like chewed up and spit out looking, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, the way she was going on, I thought, oh my gosh, when did this happen? You know what she said to me? 62 years ago.
What?
And I thought, are you kidding me? I'm thinking, I didn't say that to her, but running through my mind, I'm like, holy crap. She let it
Yeah.
define her. She let it define her life. I
Yeah.
had cancer. I had cancer. I'm a cancer survivor. Hell, I ain't got time for that. In fact, when
Yeah.
the hospital called and they said, we'll send you these support groups, I'm like, well, only we're going to talk about these god awful things that are happening and all this. She goes, oh, honey, we don't make light of that. I said, well, then I'm not going. Because if you
Right.
think I'm going to cry in my beer, I said, you don't know me very well. I said, I got a life to live. I want to have an adventure. I look for the sun to shine, right? It's partly sunny, not partly cloudy. The
Right.
glass is half full, it's not half empty, right?
Yeah.
It's truly, you are in charge of your attitude and your destiny. Somebody else can't make you angry unless you allow it. Somebody else
That's
can't make you sad unless you allow it.
that's
Right? Be in
so
control of yourself. Be the bus driver of the bus of life. Don't be a passenger on it. Take the bus down the streets you want to go on. Don't wait for somebody to do it for you. It's just, you go
I
through enough crap, Cameron. You
uh,
finally get to this point where you're like, bring it on.
yeah. 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 And it's also weird when you go through a couple things and you figure out that all that stress, all that pain, it actually turns you into a person that maybe you actually kind of wanted to be. And so now it's just like you go to the Steve Carell quote, or the Adam Almighty or Evan
Oh, yeah.
Almighty, whichever one
Evan
it is.
Almighty, I think it is. Evan Almighty. Yeah.
It's like that's exactly it. It's
Yeah.
what's weird is like graduating high school, everyone's like, "What do you wanna do? What do you wanna do?" I said, "I don't know, but I want to have a great story." And I've been crying for the past 10 years about my story, and then I remembered that, and I'm like, "I got exactly what I asked for." And it's insane that I can literally talk, think, walk, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy that I'm able to have this conversation with you. It's it's just
How
the
far you have come. I was telling you before we started about the very first podcast of yours I tripped over. And it was, I think, your 1 year anniversary with you and Dennis. And I was like, holy Hannah, like, I cannot believe what these guys are talking about. I can't believe how raw and honest they are. And I'm thinking, wow. I mean, you just made it okay for people to ex- really share the shit show of their life,
yeah.
right? And be okay that that happened to you, but you're
Mhm.
helping people find a voice and a path through it. You don't have to stay in shit creek, right?
No.
You can grab that paddle behind you and make your way across the river.
Yeah.
So you choose. It is of our choosing. We can
And then
stay
what's
like
the
the daughter saying, "Tell my mom I'm pulling back," and I'm like, "Oh, dear." But that's exactly the kick in the pants she
yeah.
needed to hear for her to
Yeah.
get back on her life.
Yeah. It is on us to take the step forward. It, that's the hardest part, that we physically have to do it. We want someone else to do it for us, or I did at
Yeah.
least. But until you take the step, until you drink the water, nothing's going to change. And
And I
then,
know too many people, I think we all do. We know too many people in our lives that everything that's gone wrong in their life is because of somebody else.
mhm,
No, chances are your life is exactly the way you made it based
mhm,
on the choices that you have made along the way. You don't like the trajectory of your life, then start making different choices.
yeah,
You really are in control. Playing the victim role, that's easy. Anybody can do that. In fact, we got plenty of people in the world doing that.
yeah,
Being the survivor and the role model for other people, especially if you have children, that's hard, but boy, is it rewarding.
mhm, yeah. Well, I tell you what, you have blessed us with so many gold nuggets. I am so
Oh,
thankful. This has been absolutely amazing. We're gonna have you on again another time. You've opened so many doors in my mind. You got me crying straight out of the gates. I don't know what's going on, all kinds of emotions,
so
but all I can say is thank you. That was absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that were able to connect. And yeah. Any last words? Anything like that you got in your back pocket?
you gotta believe in yourself even when nobody else will,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
they can't relate to you. You are really in charge of your life and your destiny. And
Yeah.
honestly, if you don't like what it is, then start making different choices. Hang out with different people, get a different job, start to make that change. You're really never too old to literally pivot and go in a completely different direction, right?
Y
It's
yeah. And
choices
we
you
sh
make.
and we
You will live with
should
the
always.
consequences. Choose wisely.
Yes. And we should always be growing. I think we have this idea that we're gonna hit a certain plateau and then we're good. That doesn't work at all, at all. You just
No,
life is shit creeks and getting out of them, and then more powerful turning back and helping the next person, and then keep moving,
absolutely.
keep moving. All right, Suzanne, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course. What stands out most in Suzanne's story isn't just what she survived, it's what she found on the other side of it. If this episode made you think or remind you of someone you've lost, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your experience. And if you're new here, this is Shit Creek Survivors. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.